Along the rocky harbors of Connecticut, where the Atlantic tides roll in quietly and old ships once creaked against wooden docks, there are inns that were built long before electricity, long before highways, and long before the dead learned how to rest. Colonial Harbor Inns. Places where sailors slept between voyages. Where merchants counted coins by candlelight. Where storms raged outside while whispers traveled through thin wooden walls. By day, these inns appear charming. Weathered shutters. Crooked staircases. Windows facing the sea. But when night falls, the harbors grow silent. Lantern lights flicker where no hands hold them. Footsteps echo across empty hallways. And doors open slowly, as if someone unseen has just arrived from the water. Some guests report waking to cold fingers brushing their faces. Others hear waves crashing inside their rooms. And a few claim they never truly checked out. Tonight, we walk the haunted harbors of Connecticut. Into colonial inns where the past still checks in. And where the sea continues to bring more than ships to shore. Hello, my dear friend. I am truly glad you are here with me tonight. Because what we are about to explore lies where history and horror intertwine, where salt air carries memories, and where old buildings remember every life that passed through them. Connecticut's coastline is lined with colonial-era harbor inns, built during times of war, trade, disease, and shipwrecks. These inns welcomed sailors escaping storms. Families fleeing conflict. And strangers who arrived with secrets they never intended to leave behind. Over centuries, many of these inns witnessed drownings, fires, duels, and disappearances. Guests today report hearing ship bells ringing from empty docks. They see wet footprints leading down hallways. They wake to the smell of seawater and decay. Some believe spirits are bound to the inns by unfinished journeys. Others say the harbors themselves call the dead back with each tide. Before we begin, let me ask you something. If you were staying alone in a colonial harbor inn, and you heard someone knock on your door at midnight, followed by the sound of waves crashing inside the hallway, would you open the door or would you stay perfectly still until morning? Now, take a slow breath. And let us step inside the most haunted colonial harbor inns in Connecticut. Widow's Anchor Inn stands on a low bluff overlooking a quiet harbor where boats drift gently at their moorings. The water here is calm most days, sheltered by curved stone jetties and distant headlands. From the inn's wide porch, guests can watch tides rise and fall without drama, the surface of the harbor reflecting sky and lantern light alike. The building itself is old but carefully maintained. White clapboard walls, dark shutters, and broad windows facing the sea give it a welcoming appearance. Guests walk the docks, listen to gulls, and enjoy the steady rhythm of harbor life. The rooms are quiet. The floors creak only with age. As evening approaches, the mood shifts subtly. Guests walk the docks, listen to gulls, and enjoy the steady rhythm of harbor life. Rocking chairs line the porch in neat rows, angled toward the water as if placed for long evenings of watching ships return. Light softens over the water. The harbor grows still. Conversations lower without intention. The sound is distant and gentle, never rising to distress. It carries across the water, shaped by the harbor's acoustics. Those who hear it often pause, listening, convinced someone nearby is grieving alone. Guests sometimes walk down to the docks to investigate. They find empty planks and quiet water. No figure stands between the boats. No movement disturbs the surface. Staff members acknowledge the reports calmly. They suggest wind, echoes, or the way sound travels over water at night. Their explanations are practiced, not dismissive, but rarely satisfying. The crying is too consistent, too clear to be easily explained away. After dark, other things begin to happen. The rocking chairs on the porch move by themselves. Guests often assume someone was just sitting there. They sway gently, back and forth, even on still nights when no breeze reaches the bluff. When the chairs are touched, they are cool and still, their movement ending the moment attention is drawn to them. Inside the inn, the atmosphere remains quiet. Hallways are softly lit. Doors stay closed. Yet guests report the feeling of being watched when passing certain windows. Especially those facing the harbor. The sensation is strongest on the upper floors, where the view stretches farther out to sea. Many see a figure staring out toward the water from upper windows. The figure does not wave or move. It simply stands, framed by the window, as if waiting. When guests look again, the window is empty. No reflection remains. Curtains hang undisturbed. Some guests mistake the sight for another visitor. They mention it casually at breakfast, only to learn the room was unoccupied overnight. Others keep the experience to themselves, unsettled by how clearly they remember the still posture and focused gaze. The crying returns late at night. It is softer than before, almost carried within the sound of water against wood. From certain rooms, the sound seems to rise directly from beneath the windows, as if the harbor itself is holding the voice. Closing the window allows it to return, steady and distant. The voice never moves closer. The voice never moves closer. It remains fixed somewhere beyond reach. Historical records offer fragments of explanation. The inn was once owned by a woman whose husband worked the harbor. He left one morning aboard a small vessel and never returned. Storms were reported that night, though no wreckage was found. The woman kept the inn open for years afterward, watching the harbor each evening until her death. No documentation confirms the story fully. Names vary. Dates shift. Yet the outline remains consistent across retellings. A loss tied to the sea. Waiting that never ended. A place shaped around looking outward rather than inward. Despite the stories, Widow's Anchor Inn remains popular. Guests continue to stay, drawn by the view and quiet charm. Most experience nothing unusual. Some hear the crying once and dismiss it. Others notice the rocking chairs and smile at the idea of lingering presence. They describe the sense of patience that fills the building at night. The feeling that time slows, stretching moments into long pauses. They recall the figure in the window not as frightening, but resolute, focused entirely on the water beyond. No one reports being approached or addressed. The presence, whatever it is, does not interact directly. It watches. It waits. It moves chairs and fills air with sound. But never crosses into confrontation. Staff members close the porch each night. They align the rocking chairs carefully, facing the harbor as always. By morning, some have shifted again. Their positions changed subtly, as if adjusted by someone with a preference for symmetry. The crying never continues into daylight. As the sun rises, the harbor returns to its usual sounds. Boats creak gently. Gulls call. The voice fades completely, leaving no echo behind. Guests who stay multiple nights report the same pattern. First night curiosity. Second night awareness. By the third, many request rooms away from the harbor side or choose to leave early, citing restlessness they cannot explain. Widow's Anchor Inn does not feel hostile. It does not seek attention or provoke fear. Instead, it holds a quiet persistence, as steady as the tides below. The presence feels bound to the view, to the line where water meets horizon. Standing on the porch at dusk, one can understand why. The harbor looks endless from that angle. Ships come and go. Most return. Some do not. Watching becomes a habit. Waiting becomes routine. As night settles, the chairs may begin to move again. A soft cry may drift across the water. And from an upper window, a figure may stand, gazing out toward the sea, unchanged by time, patient and still, keeping watch over a harbor that never quite lets go of what it has taken. Widowa's anchor in remains open, welcoming, and calm. By day, it offers rest and comfort. By night, it remembers. And the harbor listens, quietly reflecting lights, sound, and the enduring presence of someone who never stopped waiting for a return that never came. Black Sail Harbor stands at the edge of a narrow inlet where the water stays dark even under clear skies. The building leans slightly toward the shore, its foundations settled into rock and salt-worn timber. From a distance it looks peaceful, almost welcoming, a relic of another era preserved by isolation. Long before it became an inn, the structure served a different purpose. The harbor's hidden coves and winding channels once made it ideal for moving cargo quietly. Small boats slipped in at night, sails darkened, lanterns hooded. The building offered shelter, storage, and secrecy. What arrived by water left by land before dawn. Time moved on, trade routes changed, and the harbor lost its usefulness. The building remained. Eventually it was cleaned, repaired, and opened to travelers drawn by the coastline and history. Electricity was added carefully, though some rooms never received wiring due to structural limitations. Those rooms remained dark at night, relying on ambient light from the harbor and hallways. Guests rarely notice that detail until after sunset. Lantern light appears where none should exist. It begins as a faint glow beneath doors at the end of unused corridors. A warm, steady illumination, softer than modern bulbs. When guests approach, expecting staff or another visitor, the light retreats deeper into the room, never brightening enough to reveal its source. Opening the door reveals darkness. No lamp stands lit. No candle burns. The room smells faintly of salt and old wood, nothing more. When the door closes, the glow sometimes returns, patient and unhurried, as if resuming a routine interrupted. Staff members are accustomed to reports of faulty wiring. They check switches. They inspect circuits. They find nothing wrong. The rooms in question have no electrical connection at all. Doors are another concern. Even on calm nights, when the harbor water lies flat and wind barely stirs the flags outside, doors slam shut with force. Not the gentle drift of a hinge catching air, but sharp, decisive closures that echo through hallways. Guests jump awake, hearts racing, listening for footsteps that never follow. Some doors lock themselves afterward. Others refuse to stay closed, opening again moments later as if reconsidering. The behavior does not follow a pattern. It does not respond to repairs. The most unsettling reports involve the shadows. They appear near the lower floors, closest to the waterline. Guests describe seeing movement along walls, darker than the surrounding darkness, shaped loosely like a person passing just out of view. The shadows move slowly, deliberately, and always seem heavy. They leave traces. Water pools briefly where the shadows linger, seeping across wooden floors before evaporating without sound. No leak is ever found. The walls remain dry. The source of the moisture is never identified. Those who witness the shadows often feel a sharp chill, followed by an instinctive step backward. The air grows thick with the smell of the sea, stronger than it should be indoors. Breathing feels shallow until the moment passes and the space returns to normal. Sleep becomes difficult for many guests. Lantern light flickers behind closed eyelids. Doors slam somewhere below. The sound of water seems closer than the harbor should allow, as if waves are brushing against the walls themselves. Some hear soft impacts against the building, like hulls bumping gently in the night. Morning brings relief. Sunlight fills the halls. The inn looks ordinary again, worn but solid. Floors are dry. Doors behave. Staff greet guests with practiced calm, accustomed to quiet departures and shorter stays than expected. Historical records about the building are incomplete. Shipping logs mention the harbor only in passing. Old maps show structures that no longer exist. There are references to night watchmen and stored goods, but little detail about the people who worked there or where they went when operations ceased. Locals share stories carefully. They say the inn remembers the harbor as it was, not as it is now. They say the building learned to expect arrivals at night and does not understand why so many rooms remain empty. Maintenance crews report tools rusting faster inside certain rooms. Metal grows damp to the touch. Salt residue appears on surfaces cleaned hours earlier. No explanation accounts for the localized effect. Some guests claim to hear water dripping where no pipes run. The sound slows when acknowledged, then resumes once ignored. Others feel the floor subtly shift beneath their feet, like a deck adjusting to the tide. Despite everything, the inn remains open. Travelers still book rooms, drawn by coastal views and quiet seclusion. Many experience nothing unusual. They sleep well and leave with fond impressions. Others depart early, unsettled by a night they struggle to describe clearly. The staff does not dramatize reports. They listen, nod, and offer reassurance. The harbor has its moods, they say. The building is old. The sea is close. At dusk, lantern light sometimes glows again in rooms without power, reflecting faintly in windows facing the water. From outside, it looks almost welcoming, a signal to any vessel that might still be searching for shore. Black Sail Harbor Inn remains where it has always been, watching the inlet and listening to the tide. It opens its doors to the living while quietly holding on to the memory of those who once arrived by dark water, carrying cargo, secrets, and the weight of the sea with them. When night settles over the harbor, the building does not sleep. It waits, lit softly by a past that refuses to stay entirely in the dark. The old Compass House stands on a low rise near the meeting point of land routes and old sea paths, a place chosen long before modern navigation made certainty common. A resting place where directions were discussed over lantern light and journeys planned with care. From the outside, the building appears steady and symmetrical, stone walls balanced and rooflines aligned with deliberate precision. Inside, the design favors order. Hallways run straight. Doors face one another evenly. Compasses brought inside the inn behave strangely. Needles spin without settling, circling endlessly as if unable to agree on north. Digital devices lose calibration. Apps hesitate, rotate, or freeze before correcting themselves once taken back outside. Staff members are accustomed to these complaints. They respond calmly, suggesting that the structure contains old metal or that nearby geological features interfere with magnetism. The explanations sound reasonable, yet they do not account for how consistent the effect is, or how completely it vanishes beyond the threshold of the front door. Rooms at Old Compass House are furnished simply. Beds are placed squarely against walls. Tables sit centered beneath windows. Many rooms display framed maps from different eras, carefully preserved and labeled. These maps are part of the inn's history, meant to honor the travelers who once relied on them. It is not uncommon for guests to wake in the morning and find these maps rearranged. Maps left folded on desks are sometimes opened and spread across the surface. Wall maps are occasionally found tilted at new angles, their frames still secured, but their orientation subtly altered. Loose charts may be stacked differently than they were the night before, aligned in unfamiliar ways. Security footage shows empty hallways throughout the night, the cameras themselves occasionally drifting out of focus for minutes at a time. No signs of forced entry are ever found. Doors remain locked. Windows closed. Staff insist they do not enter occupied rooms except in emergencies. The most unsettling reports involve sound. Guests describe waking in the dark to the sensation of movement around their beds. Those who sit up or turn on lamps find nothing there. The room appears undisturbed. Yet the feeling of being observed lingers, heavy and persistent, making sleep difficult to reclaim. Some guests claim the footsteps respond to awareness. When they hold their breath, the sound pauses. When they relax, it resumes. Others say the steps continue regardless, indifferent to attention, following a route that never changes. Long-term staff members avoid certain rooms, though they rarely explain why. They rotate assignments quietly, ensuring no one works the same floor too many nights in a row. When asked directly, they speak of the house as if it were attentive, not hostile, but deeply invested in those who stay within it. Historical records reveal that Old Compass House was more than an inn. It served as a planning hub, a place where routes were corrected and disputes over direction settled. Navigators brought conflicting charts here to compare, align, and agree upon a shared understanding before continuing their journeys. Some never did. Accounts from centuries past mention travelers who stayed longer than intended, poring over maps late into the night, convinced something about their route was wrong. They spoke of feeling turned around even when standing still, of waking unsure which way the door faced. Local lore suggests the house was built atop an older marker. A place used to orient travelers long before compasses existed. According to these stories, the land itself demanded attention, pulling it direction and sense alike. Modern guests experience subtler effects. A persistent feeling of disorientation. Difficulty recalling which hallway leads where. An urge to check maps repeatedly, even when destinations are clear. Some wake with the sense that they were walking all night without leaving the room. Attempts to study the phenomenon have produced mixed results. Magnetic readings fluctuate inside the building but remain within explainable ranges. Structural surveys reveal no hidden mechanisms. The house appears ordinary in every measurable way. Yet patterns continue. Guests who arrive with a clear destination often leave feeling uncertain. Those who come without a plan report vivid dreams of travel, of turning points and crossroads. Many describe the house as listening, as if measuring their sense of direction against something older and more exact. The footsteps never leave tracks. The maps are never damaged. Nothing is stolen or broken. The disturbances feel precise, restrained, purposeful. By morning, the inn returns to calm. Sunlight restores familiar angles. Compasses slowly steady, though some never quite return to true north while inside. Guests check out quietly, often lingering at the door, glancing back as if reconsidering their path. Old Compass House remains open, maintained with care and pride. It continues to welcome travelers from many places, just as it always has. It offers warmth, shelter, and rest. But those who stay the night often leave with an unexpected souvenir. A lingering sense that direction is not just a matter of tools and maps, but of alignment. And that some places remember every path ever planned within their walls, quietly rearranging them in the dark. Until dawn arrives and the house lets its guests go. On the outer banks of North Carolina's Barrier Island stands the Stormwatch Colonial Inn. Built in 1892 by a retired naval architect, it was designed not for luxury but for endurance. Thick cypress beams. Reinforced brickwork. Windows layered with storm shutters that lock from the inside. Its foundation rises 10 feet above high tide on a core of hand-laid coquina stone. Over the decades it has weathered more than 30 major hurricanes. Not a single wall has buckled. Not a roof tile lost. Yet for all its strength the inn is rarely booked past sunset. Not because of decay, but because of what happens when the sun goes down. By day the inn is serene. Sunlight streams through tall arched windows. Guests tour the wide verandas and admire the craftsmanship. But as twilight settles a subtle change begins. The distant roar of the Atlantica, normally faint at this elevation, grows louder. Not outside. Inside. In the hallways. In the stairwell. In the second-floor parlor where no windows face the sea. The sound is unmistakable. Waves breaking. Not gentle surf. The deep rhythmic crash of open ocean swells striking ashore. It builds slowly. Fills the lower floors first. Then rises. By midnight. It echoes through every room. As if the building itself has been lifted. And set adrift. More perplexing is the water. Clear. Cold. Odorless. It appears without warning. Beating on ceiling beams. Tracing slow paths down plaster walls. Pooling in corners where no plumbing exists. Maintenance staff have inspected the roof repeatedly. Humidity levels remain normal. The water simply arrives. As if drawn from the air. Or summoned from memory. The inn's original blueprints survive in the county archives. They show an unusual detail. The main support columns were set not into bedrock but into a layer of compacted sand and shell. Believed to be the remnant of an older dune system. Geologists note that this stratum lies directly above a buried paleocanala and ancient river mouth. An ancient river mouth that once emptied into the sea before the islands shifted. During heat waves. During calm high-pressure systems with cloudless skies for weeks. Longtime caretakers speak of the inn with quiet reverence. Not fear. One woman who maintained the property for over 40 years said that it remembers the weight of water. The pressure of wind. The sound of the sea when the world was younger. She never tried to stop the dripping. She placed copper basins beneath the worst spots. Polished them weekly. Said it was only right to catch what the house needed to release. Audio recordings made during overnight stays capture the wave sounds with startling clarity. Spectral analysis shows frequencies matching coastal breakers, not local surf. Hydrologists confirm the water contains trace minerals consistent with deep brackish aquifers. But also microscopic diatoms extinct in the region for over 2 centuries. As if the liquid carries echoes of an older sea. Guests who remain through the night often describe a strange comfort in the sounds. Not peace exactly. But familiarity. As if the inn is speaking in the only language it truly knows. A few have reported dreams of standing on a deck in a storm. Not afraid. Just watching. Listening. Waking with salt on their lips though none was present. No damage has ever resulted from the phenomena. No structural concerns. No health hazards. The inn stands as it always has. Strong. Dry by morning. Waiting. Perhaps Stormwatch Colonial and was built to survive hurricanes not just in wood and stone but in memory. To hold the storm long after it passes. To let it speak. To let it weep. And on still nights when the wind drops and the stars blaze overhead the old inn breathes again. Deep. Slow. Full of the sea. On a lonely stretch of coastal cliff, where the wind carries the salt spray of 1,000 voyages. Its stone walls, darkened by sea mist, have been owned by generations of sailors' wives. They built it not as a business, but as a sanctuary for those who shared their vigil. For the wives, mothers, and daughters waiting for ships that might never return. It is a place of shared sorrow and stubborn hope. And the atmosphere of that long watch seems to have seeped into the very mortar of the building. Modern visitors, often historians or solitary travelers seeking a retreat from the modern world, come to experience its austere charm. They note the antique furniture, the portraits of stern-faced women in black, and the pervasive scent of beeswax and dried lavender. But they also note the phenomena. The first sign is auditory. At night, visitors hear whispered prayers. They are not loud, nor are they threatening. They are a soft, rhythmic murmur that seems to emanate from the corners of the room, or from just beyond the thick wooden door. The words are indistinct, a tapestry of old dialects and desperate pleas. The second sensation is one of temperature. Despite roaring fires in the hearths and modern heating installed in the rooms, the beds feel cold no matter the season. It is not a draft, nor the chill of old stone. It is a profound, localized cold that seems to reside deep within the mattresses themselves. Adding blankets does nothing to alleviate it. The cold is specific, a deep and penetrating absence of warmth. That seems to cling to the space where a body would lie. Many guests report a feeling of lying down upon a slab of marble, a cold that seeps into the bones and defies all logical attempts to counter it. But the most arresting accounts, those that are spoken of in hushed tones at breakfast. Those that are spoken of in hushed tones at breakfast, involve a visual manifestation. Some guests, waking in the deep quiet before dawn, have reported seeing white figures kneeling beside empty beds. The figures are not transparent, but seem composed of a soft, pearlescent light, like sea foam given shape. They are always female in form, dressed in simple, old-fashioned gowns. They are bent in postures of prayer or grief, their heads bowed, their hands clasped. They do not move or react to the living occupant of the room. They seem to be frozen in time, trapped in a world beyond our own. They simply kneel, a silent, luminous sentinel beside the cold, empty space in the bed. They fade gradually as the first light of dawn touches the window, dissolving like mist. One guest, a maritime archivist named Eleanor Shaw, came to study the INA's collection of old logbooks. She requested the Rose Room, known to be the oldest. She experienced the whispers, a sound like a dozen women sighing prayers into the dark. She felt the Beta's impossible cold. And on her final night, she awoke to see not one, but three of the pale figures. One knelt by the empty side of her bed. The other two knelt at the foot, facing the window that looked out to the Black Sea. She reported a profound sense of sadness, but also of companionship. These women were not waiting for her. They were waiting, as they always had, for someone else. Rational explanations have been offered. The whispers are the wind through a specific configuration of eaves and chimney flues, a natural Aeolian harp tuned to a somber note. The cold beds are a result of the INA's position over a subterranean spring, or a peculiar property of the old horsehair mattresses. The figures are tricks of moonlight on the gauzy curtains, combined with sleep paralysis and the power of suggestion from the INA's poignant history. The figures are tricks of moonlight on the gauzy curtains, combined with sleep paralysis and the power of suggestion from the INA's poignant history. Yet, the generations of Salorsa wives who ran the place seem to understand its nature. There is a tradition, still upheld by the current caretaker, a direct descendant of the original family. Every evening, at dusk, she goes to each guest room and turns down one side of the bed. It is a standard hospitality ritual. But here, she carefully places a single, smooth river stone, cold from the windowsill, upon the pillow of the turned-down side. It is not explained to guests. It is simply done. A gesture that seems to acknowledge the cold, and the empty space, and the perpetual wait. Salt Widow's Rest continues to operate. Guests sign the book, warm themselves by the fire, and listen to the tales of the sea. And when they retire, they enter a space where time has folded. They are not so much staying in an inn, as they are briefly joining a watch. The whispered prayers are not for them. The cold side of the bed is not theirs. The luminous figures are keeping a faith that transcends centuries. To sleep at Salt Widow's Rest is to understand that some grief is so vast, so deep, and so loving, that it simply cannot end. It becomes a permanent part of the landscape. Kneeling by an empty bed. Listening for a ship that never comes home. In a house built not for the living, but for the love that remains. In a house built not for the living, but for the love that remains. To sleep at Salt Widow's Rest. Broken mast and stands at the edge of an old harbor where fishing boats once crowded the docks and the smell of salt never faded from the air. Ship timbers were used in its construction. Long ago, damaged vessels were dismantled along the shore, their beams and planks salvaged rather than discarded. These timbers, darkened by years at sea, became the bones of the inn. Walls, floors, and ceiling supports all bear the marks of rope wear and salt exposure. Even now, faint grooves and knots hint at lives spent under open sky and rolling waves. By day, the inn feels warm and welcoming. Sunlight filters through wide windows, reflecting off polished wood that still carries a maritime scent. Guests relax in common rooms furnished with simple chairs and long tables. The sea rests quietly beyond the harbor, and the building seems content in the calm. Night transforms the space. As darkness settles, guests hear creaking like ships at sea. The creaking moves. At times it travels along the hallways, passing beneath guest rooms before fading near the stairwell. At other moments it seems to come from directly overhead, as if the ceiling itself were lifting and falling gently. The sound never becomes loud, yet it remains persistent enough to command attention. Guests accustomed to coastal buildings often dismiss it at first. Old wood settles. Temperature changes cause expansion. These explanations satisfy the mind, but not the body. The creaking carries a cadence that feels deliberate, like something responding rather than reacting. Some guests notice ropes tightening on their own. Decorative lines hang along walls and railings, remnants of nautical design meant to honor the inn past. During the day, they remain loose and still. At night, guests report finding knots drawn tighter than before, coils pulled snug against posts. No one is ever seen adjusting them. Staff members deny touching the ropes after evening cleaning. Guests who loosen them before sleep sometimes wake to find them drawn taut again, fibers stretched and creaking softly under strain. The movement is slow. No one reports seeing the ropes move directly. The change is always discovered after the fact, as if time itself performed the task quietly while attention was elsewhere. In bathrooms and guest rooms, glass fogs slightly during the night, even when the air remains cool and dry. Some guests wake to find ghostly hands appear on mirrors, pale impressions pressed flat against the surface. The hand shapes are clear. 5 fingers. A palm. Sometimes more than one print, overlapping slightly. The impressions do not drip or slide. They remain for several seconds before fading completely, leaving the mirror clean and reflective once more. These appearances do not align with sleep patterns. Guests are awake when they see them. Lights are on. The room is still. The hand shapes form without sound or warning, then vanish as if absorbed back into the glass. Late-night checks occasionally reveal faint impressions lingering in hall mirrors. By the time a cloth is retrieved, the marks are gone, leaving nothing to clean and no explanation to record. Despite the reports, the inn remains fully operational. No rooms are closed. No warnings are posted. The atmosphere remains calm, almost restrained. Guests are not frightened away so much as quietly unsettled. Historical records offer clues without certainty. The ships whose timbers formed the inn came from many origins. Some were retired peacefully. Others were damaged in storms and never returned to full service. They would carried strain, memory, and motion shaped by years of constant adjustment. Some believe the building retained that motion. They suggest the creaking is not decay, but habit. That the wood remembers movement and continues it slowly, reshaping the space to match a rhythm learned at sea. Others believe the ropes respond to pressure unseen. They say the inn settles differently at night, drawing tension upward through beams and supports. The ropes tighten as part of a system no longer visible, a mechanism built for sails and masts rather than walls and floors. The hand impressions trouble even the most practical minds. No physical residue remains. No fingerprints can be lifted. The impressions never match the hands of any guest or staff member. They appear, press, and fade without trace. Guests who stay multiple nights report an odd sense of balance. They describe feeling as though the floor shifts gently beneath them, not enough to cause alarm, but enough to recall standing on a deck rather than solid ground. This sensation fades by morning, returning only after nightfall. Dreams of water, rope, and open horizon are common among guests who had no prior interest in the sea. Some wake with the impression of movement, as if the room were traveling slowly through darkness. No one has been harmed at Broken Mast Inn. There are no reports of injury or aggressive encounters. The phenomena remain contained, observational rather than intrusive. This quiet nature makes the experiences harder to dismiss and harder to define. Guests rarely cancel reservations after a single night. Most choose to stay, driven by curiosity or a sense that the inn is not threatening, only expressive. Those who leave early often do so without complaint, citing restlessness or unease rather than fear. Morning brings normalcy. Sunlight washes the building in warmth. The creaking stops. Ropes hang loose once more. Mirrors reflect only faces and light. The harbor resumes its daily rhythm, and the inn feels grounded again. Guests recall the sound of wood moving like it never forgot the sea. The sight of rope drawn tight without hands. The brief appearance of palms pressed against glass, as if someone on the other side sought balance. Broken Mast Inn stands quietly at the harbor edge. It welcomes travelers. It offers rest and shelter. By day, it is a place of calm. The timbers remember waves. The ropes remember strain. The walls hold the echo of motion learned long before they became part of land. The inn does not call attention to itself. It does not demand belief or understanding. It simply settles into night, creaking softly, adjusting tension, and reflecting impressions that fade with morning light, leaving behind a lingering sense that some buildings never fully leave the sea behind, no matter how firmly they stand on shore. Lantern Wake Inn sits at the edge of a narrow road where the town thins into marsh and stone. But never fully modernized. The halls are narrow. The ceilings are low. Sound travels in strange ways, carrying footsteps farther than expected and swallowing them just as quickly. Guests usually arrive before sunset. In daylight, the inn feels ordinary. Staff greet visitors politely and explain the layout, including the central stairwell that connects all floors. It is mentioned only for direction, never for warning. Night changes the building. Shortly after dusk, a single lantern in the main hallway ignites on its own. It hangs from a metal hook near the stairwell, an old-style fixture no longer connected to wiring. The flame appears steady and contained, casting a warm amber glow across the walls. No one lights it. Staff members insist the lantern is decorative only. They say it has not held fuel in years. Yet every night, without fail, it burns. The light is inviting, soft against the darkened hallway. It creates long shadows that stretch toward the stairwell, shifting gently as if stirred by movement that does not exist. Some guests follow it. They walk toward the lantern, expecting to find someone nearby, perhaps a staff member making rounds. The hallway seems to extend farther than it should, each step bringing the lantern no closer. Doors along the corridor appear unfamiliar. Room numbers blur. Corners feel repeated, as though the hall has folded in on itself. When guests stop walking, the lantern remains where it is, patient and glowing. Eventually, most turn back. The moment they do, the inn snaps into place. The hallway shortens. Familiar doors reappear. The lantern now hangs behind them, closer to the stairwell than before. No matter how far one follows, it never leads anywhere new. It rises through the center of the inn, open and circular, allowing sound and air to move freely between floors. During the day, it is unremarkable. At night, it feels occupied. Guests report the sensation of being watched from within the stairwell. Not from above or below specifically, but from the space between levels. A presence without form, aware and attentive. Standing near the railing causes unease that builds quickly, urging people to step back. Looking down the stairwell produces a strange visual effect. Light from the lantern does not fully reach the bottom. Shadows gather there, deep and layered, as if absorbing illumination rather than reflecting it. Looking up offers no relief. The upper levels fade into darkness sooner than expected. Sounds behave oddly near the stairs. Footsteps echo when no one is visible. Soft movements suggest someone ascending or descending, but no figure ever appears. When guests pause to listen, the sound stops, resuming only after attention shifts away. Sleep is difficult for those whose rooms face the stairwell. They wake with the sense that someone is standing just beyond the door. The feeling fades when the door is opened, leaving only empty carpet and quiet air. Returning to bed brings the sensation back, subtle but persistent. Some guests attempt to ignore the lantern entirely. They close their doors early, avoid the hall, and keep lights on inside their rooms. Even then, the glow sometimes seeps under the doorframe, painting the floor with a thin line of amber light. No heat comes from it. Staff members conduct nightly checks but never interact with the lantern. They avoid walking beneath it after dark, taking alternate routes through service corridors. When asked why, they offer polite deflection. Old buildings have quirks, they say. Records about the inn's early years are limited. It was built as a boarding house near a river crossing that no longer exists. Travelers arrived at all hours, often late, guided by lanterns left burning to mark safe passage. Over time, the crossing shifted, the river changed course, and the inn remained. Locals say the building never stopped expecting arrivals. Maintenance inspections reveal nothing unusual. The lantern has no fuel source. The hook shows no recent wear. Attempts to remove it have failed for unclear reasons. Fastenings refuse to loosen. Tools slip. Workers abandon the effort after repeated frustration. Those who stay multiple nights report that the watching sensation grows stronger with each evening. The stairwell feels closer, as if leaning inward. Many guests leave early. They check out quietly, often without complaint, citing restlessness or unease they cannot explain. A few attempt to describe following the lantern, only to trail off, unsure how to articulate the experience without sounding unreasonable. Morning restores the inn to normalcy. The lantern is dark. The stairwell is just a stairwell. Sunlight fills the halls, flattening shadows and easing tension. Yet the pattern repeats. Each evening, as daylight fades, the lantern lights itself again. It waits in the hallway, steady and warm, offering guidance that leads nowhere. The stairwell fills with quiet attention, observing without movement or sound. Lantern Wakin continues to host travelers seeking rest. Some nights pass without incident. Others leave lasting impressions that follow guests long after they depart. The building does not trap anyone. It does not block exits or force interaction. It simply presents a light and a feeling, night after night, as if reminding those inside that arrival does not always mean being expected. When darkness settles and the lantern glows once more, the inn resumes its quiet vigil, watching the halls, waiting for footsteps that never quite reach their destination. Tidebound House stands at the edge of a narrow inlet where the sea presses close to land. Built decades ago as a coastal inn, it was designed to welcome travelers arriving by boat as well as by road. The structure rests lower than most buildings nearby, its foundation set deep into sand and stone, shaped to endure the slow, patient movement of water. During low tide, the house feels ordinary. Waves remain at a respectful distance. The shoreline stretches wide and quiet. Guests come and go without noticing anything unusual beyond the smell of salt in the air and the sound of water moving somewhere beyond view. When the sea rises, water creeps beneath the building, seeping through channels built to relieve pressure rather than block it entirely. The flooding is minor and expected. Floors on the lowest level grow damp. Staff place barriers and rugs where needed. By morning, the water retreats, leaving no damage behind. It is what appears after the water leaves that draws attention. Guests staying on upper floors often wake to find wet footprints along the corridors outside their rooms. The prints are clearly defined, pressed into wood that should never have touched the sea. They move steadily, sometimes stopping at doorways, sometimes turning corners, always leading away toward the stairwells. No one ever sees the prints form. They are discovered only after the tide has turned, when the building should be drying, not collecting moisture. The footprints vary in size. Some appear small and light. Others are broader, heavier, as if made by someone carrying weight. All share the same detail, a faint trace of sand clinging to each mark, glittering briefly before drying. Inside the rooms, guests report another disturbance. Sand appears in their beds overnight. Fine grains gather near pillows and sheets, settling into fabric as if shaken loose by movement. Windows remain closed. Doors locked. No wind strong enough to carry sand reaches that height. Housekeeping replaces linens daily, yet the sand returns, always after nights when the tide rises highest. Those who stay awake during high tide describe subtle changes in sound. The sea no longer feels distant. Water moves beneath the house with a slow, rhythmic force, creating soft thuds and creaks that travel upward through the walls. The building seems to breathe with the tide, expanding and contracting in time with the water. Some guests report hearing footsteps on the stairs late at night. The sound is wet and deliberate, distinct from the dry creak of old wood. Steps move upward, then stop. No doors open. No voices follow. Staff members insist no one moves through the building during those hours. They monitor entrances carefully, especially during high tide, when conditions require attention. Security checks reveal nothing unusual. Morning brings evidence without explanation. Damp footprints fade as the floors dry. Sand is swept away. The inn resets itself with practiced efficiency, as if accustomed to cleaning up after something that refuses to be acknowledged. Historical records suggest Tidebound House was built atop older structures closer to the original shoreline. Before the inn existed, the land served as a temporary refuge for coastal workers and sailors waiting for favorable tides. Simple shelters once stood where the water now flows freely beneath the building. Local accounts mention nights when the tide rose unexpectedly, forcing people to move quickly to higher ground. Some never made it far enough. Their stories were absorbed into routine, retold without detail, eventually fading into background knowledge. Modern guests sometimes describe vivid dreams during their stay. Dreams of standing in shallow water. Of carrying something heavy while climbing stairs that never end. Of searching for dry ground that remains just out of reach. These dreams often end abruptly, leaving the sleeper awake with the sound of water echoing in their thoughts. Not everyone experiences the disturbances. Some sleep through the night without noticing anything unusual. Others remain deeply unsettled, leaving earlier than planned. The difference seems unrelated to belief or expectation. Reactions vary without clear pattern. Attempts to study the phenomenon focus on environmental factors. Humidity, pressure changes, and building materials are all considered. Photographs capture the footprints clearly, each print crisp and unmistakable. Videos of corridors show nothing forming, only the quiet aftermath. The inn's owners maintain a careful balance. They acknowledge the flooding as part of the building's design. They do not advertise the other occurrences, nor do they deny them outright. They treat the house as something that must be respected rather than controlled. Visitors who ask directly are often told a simple guideline. Do not leave doors open during high tide. Do not sleep with windows unlatched. And if you wake to sand where it should not be, brush it away and rest again. Those who follow this advice tend to feel less disturbed, though the questions remain. By daylight, tide-bound house appears unchanged. Sunlight reflects off calm water. Floors are dry. The building feels solid and reassuring. The sea pulls back, revealing sandbars and quiet pools where nothing seems out of place. Yet with the next high tide, the cycle begins again. Water returns beneath the house. Footprints appear where water should never reach. Sand finds its way into beds and corners. Tide-bound house does not resist the sea. It yields slightly, repeatedly, as if acknowledging an older agreement. Guests pass through, leaving with stories they struggle to explain, carrying grains of sand in their memories long after they have shaken free their shoes. The house remains, balanced between land and water, listening as the tide comes in and goes out, marking each night in damp steps that fade by morning, only to return again when the sea remembers where it has been. Perched on a windswept bluff overlooking the Pacific in northern Oregon stands the Croa's Watch Harbor Inn. Built in the early 1900s as a coastal way station for lighthouse keepers and maritime surveyors, the inn retains its original cedar shingles, brass door handles, and wide ocean-facing windows. By day it is warm, inviting, even nostalgic. Guests enjoy coffee on the wraparound porch watching fishing boats glide across the horizon. But as dusk settles, the atmosphere shifts. Not dramatically. Not violently. But unmistakably. Every evening just before sunset they arrive. Dozens of them. Silent. Purposeful. They land on the steep gabled roof. In near-perfect silence. No calls. No rustling of wings. They settle shoulder to shoulder along the ridge line and upper eaves facing inland. And then they do not move. Not a head turn. Not a wing adjustment. They stand in absolute stillness. As darkness deepens. Even in high wind their feathers remain unmoved. Locals have watched for generations. Some bring binoculars. Others simply pause on the road below. All confirm the same detail. The birds face away from the sea. Toward the inn. Toward the windows. Inside the inn another phenomenon unfolds more subtly. In Mirorsa, especially the antique ones in the hallway and second-floor bedrooms, guests occasionally notice a shape behind them. Not always. Not predictably. But often enough to be remarked upon in guest books and staff logs. A tall indistinct figure. No features. No clothing details. Just a deeper shadow standing just beyond the shoulder's edge. When the guest turns, nothing is there. The space is empty. Yet in the glass the presence lingers a half-second longer before dissolving. Some describe it as a trick of the light. But the mirrors have been replaced. The lighting upgraded. The effect remains. The inner's construction holds quiet clues. Original ledgers note that the foundation was laid over an older structurea, a small signal station used in the 1870s to coordinate ship movements through the treacherous harbor entrance. That building vanished in a landslide after a winter storm. 3 keepers were lost. Their names are recorded in the town memorial, but no remains were recovered. When the inn was built, the crew reportedly found fragments of blackened timber and a single brass bell half buried in the bluff. They embedded the bell in the hearthstone of the main fireplace, where it remains today. Cold to the touch even in summer. Ornithologists have studied the crows. They are not a local roost. Banding efforts show no matches with nearby colonies. The birds arrive only at dusk. Depart silently before dawn. Never interact with other wildlife. Infrared cameras capture no movement during the night. Thermal scans show body heat consistent with living birds, yet no respiration patterns are detectable through sensitive audio monitors. One researcher suggested the birds may be drawn to subtle electromagnetic fields generated by mineral deposits in the bluff. Possible. Yet no other structures in the region produce the same effect. Staff members develop quiet routines. Housekeepers dust around the mirrors without comment. The innkeeper keeps extra candles in each room, not for power outages but for ambience, they say. Guests often request rooms without full-length mirrors. Not out of fear but preference. A sense that some spaces should remain unreflected. What makes Crow's Watch unusual is not its strangeness but its consistency. The inn operates smoothly year-round, bookings remain steady. Reviews speak of peace, of deep rest, of dreams that feel significant though hard to recall. Perhaps the presence is not an intrusion but a vigil, a quiet remembrance kept by those who once watched the sea for signs of danger. And now watch over those who rest within its walls. The crows remain still. The mirrors hold their secrets. And in the soft light of morning, when the birds finally lift off in unison, silent wings catching the first rays, the inn settles back into daylight. As it always has. Waiting. As it always has. On the edge of the windswept northern cliff stands Old Mercy Harbor Lodge. Today, it is a destination for those seeking dramatic ocean views and rustic charm. Its wide verandas and shuttered windows suggest a peaceful history. But the town's archives tell a different story. During the great shipping plagues of the 19th century, the building was requisitioned. It was not a lodge then, but a sick house. Ships with feverish crews would isolate here, their men carried into the large rooms to either recover or perish, far from the town below. This past is not hidden, but it is politely understated in the brochures. For many guests, however, the building itself seems reluctant to forget. The first indication is auditory. Throughout the lodge, particularly in the long, wooden-paneled hallways that connect the rooms, a low moaning echoes. It is not the sound of the wind, though new guests often mistake it for such. It is lower, more resonant, and carries a distinct rhythm of distress. Staff members, familiar with the sound, have learned to work around it, speaking of drafts in the old ventilation shafts. But overnight guests, lying awake in the dark, describe it as unmistakably organic. The sound of profound and weary suffering woven into the fabric of the building. The second phenomenon is one of temperature. Despite modern central heating, certain rooms and hallways are plagued by persistent cold spots. These are not gentle chills. They are pockets of intense, biting cold that can be several degrees lower than the surrounding air. A guest walking from the warm library into the east hallway might step into an invisible wall of winter, a cold so sharp it takes the breath away. These zones are well known to the staff, who often route cleaning carts around them. The cold spots do not shift or dissipate. They are fixed in place, as permanent as the floorboards, often corresponding to areas that old floor plans label as treatment wards or palliative care spaces. The most unsettling reports, however, are not of sounds or cold, but of sudden, transient illness. Some feel sudden illness while staying here. A perfectly healthy person could wake in the night with a pounding headache and a feverish sweat, only for the symptoms to vanish completely by sunrise. These episodes are brief, intense, and leave no aftereffects except for a deep sense of unease. It is as if the body is momentarily remembering a sickness that belonged to someone else, a ghost of a symptom echoing through time. A travel writer, here to review the lodge's renovation, documented such an experience. One evening, while reading in the former sunroom, a space once used as a convalescence area, she was overcome by a profound and shivering chill. Moments later, a wave of debilitating weakness passed through her, along with a sharp pain behind her eyes. It lasted less than a minute. As it faded, she clearly heard the moaning sound, which seemed to originate from the corner of the room she was in, a corner now occupied by a cheerful potted fern. In her published article, she praised the lodge's views and cuisine. Her private notes, later shared, contained a single line. "It is not haunted by ghosts, but by the sickness itself." Scientific explanations are readily available. The moaning is attributed to the unique wind patterns around the cliff face, channeled through the lodge's original coal chutes and dumbwaiters. The cold spots are drafts from the stone foundation, or the result of poor insulation in specific walls. The episodes of illness are suggestibility, or perhaps mild carbon monoxide fluctuations from the aging boiler system. These are logical, comforting answers. Yet, the current owners, who love the building deeply, engage in small, unspoken rituals. They keep fresh water and clean glasses in every room, a gesture beyond standard hospitality. They avoid scheduling children or elderly guests in the rooms with the most pronounced cold spots. There is a small, well-tended herb garden by the kitchen door, from which they sometimes cut sprigs of lavender and rosemary, placing them in bowls in the hallways. These are old remedies, herbs once believed to purify air and ward off miasma. Old Mercy Harbor Lodge continues to welcome guests. The fires are warm, the food is excellent, and the ocean crashes magnificently against the cliffs below. But the building retains its dual nature. It is a place of respite, built upon a foundation of profound respite. To walk its halls is to move through a layered memory. The moaning is the echo of a collective breath. The cold spots are the shadows of forgotten fevers. The sudden, passing illness is a touch from a past that has not fully faded. The lodge does not mean to harm. It simply cannot help but remember its original, solemn purpose. A purpose soaked in the hope for mercy. And the quiet, lingering presence of those who waited, suffered, and convalesced within its walls. Listening to the endless sighing of the sea. Seafarers' last rest stands near an old harbor road where the smell of salt still lingers in the air. The building is long and narrow, its windows facing the water as if meant to keep watch over ships coming home. Weathered stone forms its foundation, and the walls carry the faint creak of age with every change in temperature. The structure was once a recovery house for injured sailors. Long before modern medicine reached the coast, crews brought their wounded here when ships docked with men too hurt to return to sea. Broken bones, crushed limbs, and lingering illness were treated as best as possible within these walls. Many recovered. Some did not. Records show that sailors often died here from injuries. Storm accidents, rigging failures, and falls left marks that never healed. Those who passed were laid out in quiet rooms while the harbor continued its daily rhythm outside. The building became known as a place of rest, both temporary and final. Today, it operates as a small lodging for travelers drawn to the coastline. By day, Seafarer's last rest feels peaceful. Sunlight reflects off the water and fills the rooms with soft light. The sound of gulls and distant waves drifts in through open windows. Nothing about the atmosphere suggests unease. Night changes the tone. As the harbor quiets, the building grows still in a way that feels deliberate. Guests often notice the change while preparing for sleep, when outside noise fades and the building settles into silence. That is when the coughing begins. The sound is never loud. It resembles someone trying not to disturb others, muffling each breath. The coughing comes in short fits, followed by long pauses. Those who investigate find nothing. Doors open onto empty beds and untouched furniture. Lights reveal no movement. The sound fades when approached, only to return later from another part of the building. It never repeats in the same room twice in one night. The coughing does not sound alarming. It carries exhaustion rather than urgency, as if the effort of breathing itself requires concentration. Some guests assume another traveler is unwell and choose not to intrude. Others alert staff, who quietly confirm that no one is staying in the rooms where the sound originated. Staff members are accustomed to these reports. They offer reassurance without explanation, suggesting pipes, airflow, or distant harbor noise. Yet the coughing follows no mechanical pattern. It pauses when spoken about, returning only when attention shifts elsewhere. Another experience unsettles guests even more. Beds indent as if someone lies beside them. This sensation often occurs just after sleep begins. A mattress dips slightly, slow and controlled, creating the unmistakable impression of added weight. The indentation forms near the edge of the bed, never directly on top of the sleeper. Those who remain still feel the pressure settle. The mattress compresses, then holds, as if someone has carefully lowered themselves into place. No warmth follows. No sound accompanies the movement. The bed simply adjusts to accommodate presence. Guests who turn to look find empty space. Sheets remain smooth. Pillows untouched. The indentation fades gradually, leaving the mattress level again. The experience ends as quietly as it began. This does not happen to everyone. Some guests sleep through the night without incident. Others experience it once and never again. A few report multiple nights with the same sensation, always consistent in placement and timing. The presence never crowds or presses. It remains respectful, keeping distance, as if sharing space rather than claiming it. This restraint unsettles guests more than overt disturbance would. Historical accounts suggest a reason. Sailors recovering from injuries were often placed in shared rooms. Space was limited. Beds were close. Men accustomed to crowded ships slept side by side, drawing comfort from proximity even in pain. Some believe this habit lingered. They suggest the impressions on beds reflect memory rather than intention. That the space remembers how it was used, replaying patterns long after the people are gone. Others believe the coughing and bed movement are connected. They describe a sequence. First the sound of strained breathing. Later, the sensation of shared rest. In this interpretation, the building replays the final nights of those who did not recover, repeating quiet moments of endurance rather than trauma. Mirrors and walls show no signs. There are no handprints. No shadows. No movement visible to the eye. The experiences remain tactile and auditory, felt and heard rather than seen. Medical staff once kept vigil here. They moved quietly at night, checking breathing, adjusting blankets, sitting beside beds through long hours. The building absorbed this routine, learning the sound of coughing and the weight of bodies settling into rest. Guests who stay longer notice patterns. The coughing occurs most often just after midnight. The bed indentation usually follows within the hour. By early morning, all activity stops. The building feels empty again. Morning light brings relief. Sunlight fills the rooms. Beds feel firm and ordinary. The harbor resumes its gentle sounds. Guests often question whether the night experiences were dreams, until they speak with others who describe the same details. No one has been harmed at Seafarer's last rest. There are no reports of panic, injury, or aggressive behavior. The atmosphere remains subdued and calm, marked by quiet persistence rather than fear. Some guests find comfort in the experience. They describe the presence as tired rather than threatening. A sense of companionship rather than intrusion. For others, the idea of sharing space with unseen company proves too unsettling to ignore. Many choose to leave after one night. They do so politely, without complaint, citing poor sleep or personal reasons. Others stay longer, curious or unbothered, accepting the building as it is. The staff maintains the rooms carefully. Beds are made. Floors cleaned. Windows open daily to air out the space. Nothing unusual is found during upkeep. No signs of use appear between guests. Seafarer's Last Rest continues to welcome travelers. It offers shelter, quiet, and a view of the water. Its reputation spreads slowly through word of mouth rather than headlines. Those who experience the coughing remember its restraint. Those who feel the bed shift remember how gentle the movement was. No rush. No force. Just the careful adjustment of someone settling in beside them. The building does not trap or follow. It does not demand acknowledgement. It simply replays moments shaped by pain, patience, and proximity, repeating them softly for those who stay long enough to notice. Seafarer's Last Rest remains near the harbor, watching tides come and go. By day, it is calm and ordinary. By night, it remembers. And within its walls, echoes of recovery and rest continue quietly, offering space to those who once needed it, and reminding modern guests that some places never forget how to hold the tired, even long after the sea has taken them. Fog Bell Inn sits along a coastal road where land slopes gently toward the sea. The building is old, its stone walls darkened by salt and moisture carried in from the water. From a distance it looks steady and grounded, a place meant to withstand harsh weather and long nights. Travelers stop there for shelter, unaware that the fog shapes more than just the view. The bell hangs above the front entrance, centered beneath a small wooden beam. It is large and heavy, its surface worn smooth by decades of wind and rain. There is no rope attached. No chain. Nothing that could pull it into motion. When fog rolls in, the bell rings. It never rings early. It never rings late. The sound begins at the exact moment the fog reaches the inn. Drifting in from the sea in slow, rolling waves. The bell does not swing wildly. It moves just enough to produce a deep, measured tone that echoes across the grounds. Guests hear it from inside their rooms, a low resonance that travels through the walls and floorboards. The sound is not alarming. It feels ceremonial, like a signal marking a transition rather than a warning. Staff members do not react to the bell. They continue their tasks, setting lamps, clearing tables, speaking in calm voices. When asked about it, they explain that fog is common here and the bell has always rung. They do not elaborate further. As fog thickens outside, visibility drops quickly. Windows turn pale and opaque. The coastline disappears. Even the courtyard just beyond the entrance fades into white. Sound from the sea becomes distant and distorted, as if wrapped in layers of cloth. Guests who attempt to leave during heavy fog often find it impossible. Doors open easily, but stepping outside brings immediate disorientation. The world beyond the threshold lacks depth. Direction feels unreliable. Paths that should lead to the road curve subtly back toward the building. Footsteps sound wrong, muffled and close, as if the ground itself is absorbing movement. Some guests try to walk anyway, convinced they can follow the road by memory. After several minutes, they find themselves back at the inn, approaching from a direction they did not take. Others attempt to drive. Vehicles start without issue, headlights cutting shallow tunnels into the fog. But the road refuses to cooperate. Turns appear too soon or too late. Familiar landmarks never emerge. After cautious progress, drivers realize they are circling the inn, returning again and again without choosing to do so. Phones lose signal during these moments. Navigation systems freeze or spin, unable to confirm position. Time becomes difficult to judge. Minutes stretch without reference. Inside the inn, the atmosphere shifts. Hallways feel longer. Rooms feel closer together. Conversations lower in volume without anyone deciding to whisper. Guests gather in common areas, drawn together by shared uncertainty. Staff serve warm drinks and suggest waiting until the fog lifts, their calm unwavering. The bell rings throughout the night. It never speeds up. It never slows down. Each strike feels evenly spaced, patient and consistent. Attempts to locate movement in the bell reveal nothing. It sways slightly, but no wind reaches it. The whiteness outside presses against windows, close enough to feel intimate. Curtains do little to block the sense of proximity. Some guests report feeling watched during these hours, not by a figure or presence, but by the fog itself. Sleep comes unevenly. Dreams feel shallow and repetitive, often involving walking familiar paths that lead nowhere. Waking brings brief relief, followed by the realization that the bell is still ringing. Morning does not always break the fog. Sometimes it lingers well into the day, thick and unyielding. Meals are served. Lights remain on. The inn functions as though the outside world has temporarily ceased to exist. No deliveries arrive. No departures succeed. Historical accounts suggest the bell was once used to guide ships away from hidden rocks near the coast. Long before modern navigation, its sound carried across the water during low visibility. Over time, the rope wore through and was removed. The bell remained. No record explains how it continues to ring. Maintenance inspections find no mechanical system. The bell rests freely, influenced by nothing measurable. Attempts to silence it during fog have failed. Padding dampens the sound but does not stop it. Removing the bell entirely was attempted once, decades ago. The effort was abandoned after workers reported losing track of time and direction while on the roof. Eventually, the fog lifts. It thins gradually, loosening its hold on the landscape. Shapes return. The sea reappears. The road stretches forward as expected. The bell falls silent the moment visibility clears, its final note fading naturally into the air. Guests who leave afterward do so quickly. They pack without lingering, eager to move beyond the reach of the sound. Eager to move beyond the reach of the sound. When asked about their stay, many struggle to describe it clearly. They mention the fog, the bell, and the strange difficulty of leaving. But their words feel inadequate. The inn returns to normal between fog events. Doors lead where they should. Paths remain straight. The bell hangs quietly above the entrance, unmoving and harmless. Fog Bell Inn continues to welcome travelers, offering warmth and shelter along the coast. It does not trap anyone permanently. It does not threaten. It simply responds to the fog, marking its arrival and holding those within reach until the sea and sky decide to release them. When the bell rings, the inn waits. And until the fog lifts, so does everyone else. Blackwater Quay Inn stands at the end of a long wooden dock where the harbor narrows and the current slows. By day, it appears welcoming, its windows reflecting the sky, its balconies overlooking water that should be clear and shallow. Boats tie up nearby, gulls circle overhead, and the smell of salt and old timber hangs in the air. It is the water beneath the dock that first unsettles visitors. Even in full sunlight, it appears darker than the surrounding harbor, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Locals explain this as a trick of sediment and tide, though few linger at the edge long enough to test the explanation. At night, the water turns completely black, merging with the absence of light beneath the dock until it feels less like water and more like a void. The inn has welcomed travelers for generations. Sailors, merchants, and tourists have all passed through its rooms. The building creaks as most old waterfront structures do, responding to tide and temperature with soft complaints that fade into the background. After sunset, the atmosphere changes. Guests resting near open windows often report hearing voices rising from below the dock. The sound is faint at first, almost indistinguishable from water shifting against pilings. Over time, the rhythm becomes more deliberate, forming patterns that feel intentional. The voices do not shout. They do not cry out in alarm. They speak softly, steadily, carried upward by the water and wood. Words are difficult to make out, but the tone feels familiar, as if calling someone who is expected to answer. Those who lean out to listen hear the sound more clearly, yet never clearly enough to identify language. It feels directed, personal, as though the water itself has recognized them. Staff members dismiss these reports as sound traveling strangely over water. They point to boats, currents, and nighttime acoustics. The explanations satisfy some guests, but not those who feel the next effect. Guests describe standing near the glass and feeling a gentle pressure, not physical force, but suggestion. The idea of stepping closer feels natural, almost necessary. Thoughts slow. The outside air feels inviting, cooler, calmer than the room behind them. Those who catch themselves often step back quickly, startled by how close they were to the window without remembering deciding to move. Security records show multiple instances of guests found standing at open windows late at night, unmoving, eyes focused downward. When approached, they respond slowly, as if waking from deep concentration. They rarely remember how long they were there. No one has ever reported seeing anything in the water. There are no shapes, no reflections, no lights beneath the surface. The darkness remains absolute, offering no visual anchor for the attention it commands. Historical archives provide fragments of context. Before the inn existed, the quay served as a loading point for cargo transferred between larger ships and smaller vessels. Work continued through the night to meet tides and schedules. Accidents were not uncommon, though records are incomplete. Old journals mention sounds rising from the water after dark, attributed to shifting cargo and creaking hulls. Over time, these mentions grow vaguer, less practical, more cautious in tone. Guests staying on lower floors report stronger sensations. The sound of water moving beneath their rooms feels closer, more present. Sleep is shallow. Dreams often involve standing on docks that stretch endlessly, with dark water below offering no reflection. Those who keep windows closed experience fewer disturbances. Curtains drawn seem to dull the effect further. The inn quietly encourages these practices without formal instruction, as if following a routine developed through long familiarity. Morning light transforms the space. The water lightens slightly, revealing nothing unusual beneath the dock. The voices vanish completely. Windows stand open without incident. Guests often question their own reactions in daylight, embarrassed by the intensity of what felt undeniable hours earlier. Environmental studies conducted in the area show no contamination, no abnormal depth, no current strong enough to explain the sensations reported. Sonar readings reveal a normal harbor floor. Nothing waits beneath the dock, at least nothing measurable. Long-term employees speak of the inn as something balanced precariously between comfort and attention. They believe the building listens as much as it shelters. That it amplifies what already exists rather than creating it. Some suggest the water remembers. That years of movement, labor, and loss have left impressions not visible, but audible and emotional. Whether this is metaphor or belief varies by who tells the story. What remains consistent is the advice shared quietly among those who know the inn well. Do not lean out of windows at night. Do not answer sounds from below. And if you feel drawn toward the dark water, step back and turn on a light. Blackwater Quay Inn continues to operate without incident severe enough to close its doors. Travelers still arrive, rest, and depart. Many never experience anything unusual. Others leave with stories they struggle to share, unsure how to describe a pull that left no mark. The dock remains steady. The water remains dark. And at night, when the harbor grows still and the inn settles into quiet. The inn settles into quiet. Something beneath the quay continues to call upward. Softly and patiently. Waiting to be noticed. Even if no one ever answers. The quay continues to call upward. Softly and patiently. Waiting to be noticed. Even if no one ever answers. On a narrow salt-swept peninsula in coastal Maine stands a weathered clapboard house known locally as the Widowa Lantern House. Built in the late 1800s by a shipwright whose vessel vanished in the Gulf of Maine. The home has passed through generations and never sold, only inherited, always with the same quiet condition. Keep the lantern lit. Though no one now remembers who first spoke those words. The house itself shows the marks of time. Cedar shingles silvered by wind and spray. Shutters hanging slightly ajar. A small widow's walk crowns the roof, though no telescope remains. Visitors remark on its quiet dignity. Its resilience. Yet all attention eventually turns to the second floor. To the northeast corner room. The door is plain. Unlocked. Always slightly ajar, just enough to reveal a sliver of warm light from within. Because every night without fail a lantern glows inside. Not flickering. Not smoking. Casting a soft amber pool across the floorboards and up the faded floral wallpaper. No fuel has been added in decades. And the wick shows no signs of consumption. And the room remains empty. Dust motes drift in the light. No footprints disturb the thin layer on the floorboards. No furniture has been moved. Just the lantern. Burning. Alone. The moment the door is opened, even gently the flame extinguishes. Not with a puff of air. Not with a sputter. Instantly. As if snuffed by an unseen hand the precise second the threshold is crossed. Those who have tried report the same sensation. A slight drop in temperature. A hush deeper than silence. And then the smell. Faint but unmistakable. Seawater. Not fresh or briny. Stale. Heavy. Like water drawn from deep below the surface. Layered beneath it a scent of damp wood and old decay, not rot, but the quiet breakdown of things long submerged. The room itself holds few clues. A narrow bed with a worn quilt. A small writing desk with an open journal, whose pages are blank. No names. No dates. Nothing disturbed. Historical records mention the original owner's wife who lived in the house alone for 42 years after her husband's disappearance. Neighbors noted she would climb to the widow's walk each evening with a lanterna, lighting it at dusk, carrying it down only at dawn. She never remarried. Never left the peninsula. When she passed in 1931, the lantern was found on the desk in that same room. Cold. Unlit. The house stood empty for 7 years before a distant relative moved in. The first night, they reported light beneath the door. Scientists have examined the phenomenon. Thermal cameras show no residual heat after the flame vanishes. Air quality tests detect elevated sodium chloride and trace organic compounds consistent with marine sediment. Yet no leaks exist. No standing water. And the scent lingers only in that room. And only after the lantern has burned. Those who stay in the house often describe a sense of calm rather than dread. A feeling of being witnessed, not judged. Some leave small tokens on the desk: a smooth stone, a sprig of beach rosia as quiet acknowledgement. None have been moved. None disturbed. The lantern never reignites on its own once extinguished. But if the door is closed again, even minutes later, it will be burning once more by nightfall. Steady. Patient. As if time inside that room flows differently. As if the flame is not a signal sent outward but a memory held in place. Perhaps the light is not meant to guide the lost back home. Perhaps it is meant to show the living where remembrance still burns. The house endures. The tide turns. And each evening as the sun slips below the horizon, the lantern glows again. Waiting. Not for return. But for recognition. A vast, tentacled creature emerges from the depths of the harbor. Its eyes burn with an otherworldly power. She falls to her knees, overwhelmed by the horror. Her eyes are wide with fear, her face pale. The air is thick with an unspeakable horror. The captain's hollow inn sits at the end of a cobbled lane in the oldest part of the harbor district. It is a place of dark wood and low ceilings, smelling of polished brass, salt, and centuries of piped smoke. Its primary decoration is its namesake collection. Portraits of ship captains line the walls. Dozens of them, from different eras, stare out from heavy gilded frames. They are men of stern bearing, with weathered faces and steady gazes, each one a master of vessels with names like Sea Queen and Morning Star. The inn is a museum to a bygone age of sail, and guests often enjoy this immersive history. The unease begins subtly. Many visitors report the same initial sensation. The eyes in the portraits seem to follow guests. It is a common trope in old tales, but here it feels different, more persistent. It is not just a single painting. As you walk the main hallway, or sit in the tavern below, you feel the collective weight of their observation. A captain by the stairs watches you ascend. A portrait in the dining room tracks your progress to your table. The feeling is not overtly hostile, but it is intensely evaluative, as if each guest is being silently assessed by a panel of seasoned, unforgiving mariners. This sensation is merely a prelude to the inn's primary phenomenon. It occurs at night, after the last of the downstairs lights are extinguished and the old building settles into its nocturnal rhythms. This is when the whispers come from behind the frames. They are not loud. They are faint, papery sounds, like pages turning in a logbook, or the murmur of conversation through a thick cabin door. Guests lying in the rooms adjacent to the portrait hall describe them vividly. The whispers are multiple, layered, a quiet conference of voices. You cannot make out words, only the urgent, hushed tone of men in deep discussion. They seem to issue from the space between the portrait canvas and the wall, as if the captains are holding counsel in the darkness. One frequent guest, a maritime historian named Mr. Evans, chose the inn specifically for its ambience. He became fascinated by the whispers. Using sensitive recording equipment, he attempted to capture the sounds. His digital records picked up only the usual creaks of an old inn. But in his personal journal, he wrote that the whispers were not auditory in the normal sense. He believed they were a form of pressure, a subconscious vibration that the mind interpreted as sound. He noted that the feeling of being watched by the portraits was strongest just before the whispering began, as if attention had to be gathered before communication could commence. The INA's staff are politely evasive on the subject. They acknowledge that guests sometimes comment on the drafty halls and the interesting acoustics of the building. Yet, there are small tells in their behavior. The task is strictly a daytime activity. Furthermore, no portrait of a living captain has ever been added to the collection. The lineage stops with the last of the great commercial sailing ships. The current owner, a descendant of the INA's founder, has a simple rule. The portraits must remain exactly where they are. They are not just decoration, she says. They are the ballast of the place. The rational explanations are, of course, offered. The following eyes are a simple trick of perspective and painting technique, combined with the suggestive power of the environment. These are sensible, solid reasons. But there is another theory, one that circulates among the older patrons in the tavern. They say a captain's duty never ends. He is responsible for his ship, his crew, and his course, even after the voyage is over. The inn, built from the timbers of decommissioned ships, became a final harbor. The portraits are not mere images. They are anchor points. These men, so tied to command and vigilance, cannot fully relinquish their watch. And at night, they confer. They discuss the weather of the human world. The passing storms of sorrow and joy in the lives of the guests below. Of routines and rhythms, of the strange, land-bound voyage of a night's stay. Staying at the Captain's Hollow Inn is therefore a participatory act. You are not just a guest. You are a temporary part of the crew, a subject of their silent, nightly log. The feeling of being watched is their navigation. The whispers are their charting. It is not about haunting in the traditional sense. It is about a perpetual state of duty. To sleep within those walls is to be under the protection, and the scrutiny, of a company of commanders, who still pace the quarterdeck of their portraits, listening to the wind in the wires, and whispering about the strange, calm sea of the landlubbers who have drifted, for one night, into their eternal harbor. Driftwood Harbor House stands at the edge of a sheltered inlet where the tide moves slowly and the water rarely grows rough. The building began as a simple coastal residence, expanded over time with additional rooms and porches. Wide windows face the inlet. Floors are made of long wooden planks worn smooth by footsteps. Everything inside feels carefully placed, balanced for comfort and calm. By day, Driftwood Harbor House feels welcoming. Light pours through the windows and spreads across the floors. Furniture sits neatly arranged. Chairs face the water. Beds are aligned squarely against the walls. Guests describe the space as restful, ideal for quiet stays near the sea. The house holds still, as if waiting. Morning brings the first questions. Some guests wake to find furniture rearranged. Chairs that were pushed against the wall now face the center of the room. Small tables sit closer to windows. Objects are not damaged or overturned. They are simply moved, positioned with care rather than force. Guests often assume they misremembered. Travel can blur details. Fatigue reshapes memory. Most straighten the furniture and move on, thinking little of it. The house offers no resistance, no sound, no sign of disturbance. The second night is different. Guests wake facing different directions. Beds that were aligned north to south now sit at a slight angle. Some sleepers find themselves turned entirely, their feet where their head had been before. Sheets remain tucked. Pillows stay in place. The shift feels intentional and precise. Those who wake during the change report nothing. No creaking wood. No movement. The transition seems to occur between moments of sleep, as if the house waits for unconsciousness before adjusting its space. Some feel the bed drifting like a boat. The sensation is gentle and rhythmic. A slow sway beneath the mattress, similar to floating on calm water. Those who sit up feel the motion fade. Lying back down allows it to return, steady and reassuring rather than alarming. The feeling lasts only minutes, then settles into stillness once more. Guests who sleep lightly experience the strongest effects. They describe drifting dreams that blend with the sensation of movement. Hallways feel longer. Rooms feel wider. Directions lose clarity. Upon waking, orientation feels briefly uncertain, as if the house has turned while they rested. By morning, the house appears normal again. Furniture remains in its new positions, stable and balanced. Beds no longer move. The harbor outside reflects the sky calmly, offering no hint of motion or disturbance. Staff members are familiar with the reports. They listen patiently, offering explanations tied to uneven flooring or subtle foundation shifts near the water. These explanations sound reasonable, yet they do not explain how furniture moves without noise or how beds rotate cleanly without dragging marks. Maintenance inspections reveal nothing unusual. Floors are level. Foundations are secure. There are no signs of structural movement large enough to account for the changes. No scuff marks appear beneath furniture. Everything suggests careful placement rather than sliding. The house seems to favor symmetry. Rearranged furniture often aligns with windows or doorways. Local stories hint at the reason. Driftwood Harbor House was once owned by a family whose livelihood depended on the water. Boats came and went daily. The rhythm of tides shaped schedules and sleep. According to these accounts, the house was always oriented toward the harbor, adjusted often to catch light and breeze. Some believe the house learned to move with the water. They suggest the building absorbed years of gentle motion, adapting its interior to mirror the calm drift of anchored boats. In this view, the rearrangement is not disruption, but alignment. Others believe the house responds to guests. They say it senses restlessness and adjusts space to create balance. Turning beds toward the harbor, shifting furniture to open pathways, creating the sensation of floating rather than confinement. Guests who resist the changes feel more unsettled. Those who push furniture back repeatedly often experience stronger movement at night. The drifting sensation lasts longer. Orientation feels more uncertain upon waking. Those who accept the changes report calmer sleep. They allow the furniture to remain where it settles. They lie still during the drifting sensation. Many describe waking refreshed, as if the house carried them gently through the night. No one has been harmed at Driftwood Harbor House. The experiences remain subtle, controlled, and consistent. The house does not trap or confuse. It adjusts, then rests. Some guests choose to leave early. They find the loss of control uncomfortable, even if the movement is gentle. Others extend their stay, curious about how the house will change next. Each night brings slight variation. Furniture shifts differently. Beds rotate by a few degrees more or less. The drifting sensation returns or remains absent, never exactly repeating itself. The harbor outside remains constant. Tides rise and fall. Boats rock softly. Driftwood bumps against the shore and settles again. The same motion seems to echo within the house, translated into quiet adjustments. By the final morning, many guests notice a change in themselves. They feel more aware of orientation, more sensitive to movement. Standing still feels different, as if balance now includes an expectation of sway. Leaving the house restores normal sensation. Roads feel solid. Beds elsewhere feel too still. Some guests miss the gentle drift, the sense of being carried rather than held in place. Driftwood Harbor House remains by the inlet, unchanged in appearance. By day, it is a peaceful coastal home. By night, it becomes something closer to the water it overlooks, adjusting its interior like a vessel adjusting to tide. Furniture rearranges itself. Guests wake facing different directions. Beds drift gently, then settle. The house does not announce these changes or explain them. It simply moves as it always has, in quiet response to the harbor below. Inviting those who stay to rest within its slow, steady rhythm. If they are willing to let go and float. Still tide Colonial stands along a sheltered bay where the coastline curves inward, protecting the water from open sea winds. The change begins quietly. Guests first notice it through the windows. The water outside grows unnaturally still. Waves that should lap against the shore slow, then stop entirely. The surface becomes smooth, reflective, like polished glass stretched across the bay. Boats rest without rocking. Reflections sharpen until the world seems doubled. There is no wind to explain it. Birds hesitate at the shoreline, circling without landing. The air grows dense, pressing softly against the skin. Sound carries strangely, both muted and sharp at once, as if the space between noise has thickened. Inside the inn, guests begin to feel pressure. It starts behind the eyes. A subtle tightening that makes blinking feel deliberate. Ears ring with a low, steady tone that does not fluctuate. It is not loud, but it is persistent, filling the absence left by the still water outside. Swallowing does nothing to relieve it. The feeling settles deeper the longer one remains. Conversations falter. Guests lose their place mid-sentence. Words feel harder to form, as if thought must travel farther before becoming speech. Silence grows between exchanges, not uncomfortable at first, but heavy with expectation. The voices arrive. They do not come through sound. No one hears them with their ears. Instead, thoughts appear fully formed, inserted gently but unmistakably into the mind. The voice feels familiar, shaped like Oni's own inner dialogue, yet distinctly not self-generated. The messages are calm. They speak in reassurance, offering guidance, observations, and reminders. Simple statements at first. You are safe. Stay still. Listen. Guests often assume they are imagining it. They look around, searching faces for signs of shared experience. Some notice others growing still, eyes unfocused, breathing shallow. When they attempt to ask questions, words stall, replaced by the ringing and pressure that now feel constant. The water outside remains frozen in place. No ripple breaks its surface. Clouds reflect perfectly, unmoving. Time feels suspended, as though the bay has slipped out of sequence with the rest of the world. Those who try to leave during this period encounter resistance. Doors open without issue, but stepping outside brings immediate discomfort. The pressure intensifies. The ringing sharpens. Thoughts become crowded with overlapping impressions, urging return. Legs feel weak. Balance falters slightly, enough to make retreat seem reasonable. Once back inside, the sensations ease just enough to allow rest. Staff members appear unaffected. They move calmly through the inn, performing tasks with practiced ease. When guests attempt to describe what they are experiencing, staff listen politely but offer no confirmation. They suggest rest, hydration, and patience, their expressions steady and composed. Nightfall deepens the effect. Lanterns glow softly, their light reflecting endlessly off the still bay. The boundary between inside and outside feels thin. Guests report vivid thoughts that do not feel their own, memories surfacing without context. Images of water, shoreline, and waiting. The voices grow more specific. They address fears unspoken. They mention decisions delayed, paths not taken. They do not accuse or command. They simply acknowledge, as if taking inventory of those present. Sleep becomes fragmented. Dreams blend seamlessly into waking awareness. Some awaken with the certainty that they were listening rather than sleeping. The ringing persists even in rest, a constant undercurrent. A constant undercurrent. No physical source is ever found. Medical explanations fall short. No environmental factor accounts for the shared sensations. Pressure readings remain normal. Sound levels do not change. Yet the experience remains consistent across visitors unfamiliar with one another. Historical documents offer limited insight. The inn was built during a time when the bay served as a harbor for colonial trade. Ships often waited there for tides and conditions to change, sometimes for days. Logs mention periods of complete stillness, when water refused to move and crews delayed departure without clear reason. No incidents are recorded. No disasters noted. Only waiting. Eventually, the water releases. The first ripple appears suddenly, spreading outward as if breaking a surface tension. Waves resume their gentle motion. Birds return. Wind stirs. The ringing in ears fades. Pressure lifts without ceremony. The voices stop. Guests often realize the silence only after it has returned. Thoughts feel lighter. Speech flows normally again. Relief settles slowly, accompanied by confusion. And a lingering sense of vulnerability. Morning reveals an ordinary bay. Boats rock gently. Reflections blur with movement. The inn resumes its quiet routine. Guests depart sooner than planned. When asked about their stay, many hesitate. They describe the still water, the pressure, the strange thoughts. Their accounts vary in detail but align in feeling. Something reached inward, touched quietly, then withdrew. The staff offers no explanation. They thank guests and wish them safe travels. Still tide Colonial Inn remains open, its presence steady along the bay. Most days pass without incident. The water behaves as expected. Guests enjoy peaceful stays and leave satisfied. But on certain nights, when conditions align and the bay falls unnaturally still, the inn becomes something else. A place where sound retreats, pressure builds, and voices bypass the ears entirely. Those who experience it carry the memory long after they leave, uncertain whether they were heard, observed, or simply reminded that silence can speak in ways sound never could. And when the tide finally moves again, it leaves behind only the question of what lingered in the stillness, and whether it noticed who was there. Widowmaker Wharf stands at the far end of an aging pier where the shoreline bends inward and the water deepens suddenly. Its foundation rests on thick pilings driven deep into the seabed, supporting a building that has weathered storms, salt, and time. By day, the inn appears worn but functional. Paint peels gently from railings. Wood creaks underfoot. The docks stretch outward in straight lines, orderly and quiet. There is nothing to suggest danger beyond the name, which locals explain away as a reference to difficult working conditions long ago. At night, the atmosphere shifts. Several guests over the years have fled the inn before sunrise, abandoning belongings and refusing refunds. They speak of figures in the halls. The sightings often begin after midnight, when the building settles and the sounds of the harbor diminish. Guests report waking to the sound of water dripping, slow and rhythmic, echoing through corridors where no leaks are known to exist. Opening their doors reveals shapes moving at the far end of the hall. Tall figures, indistinct, their outlines blurred as if seen through rain. Water trails from them, pooling briefly on the wooden floor before fading away. The figures do not rush. They move with steady purpose, leaving damp footprints that glisten faintly in low light. Those who see them describe an overwhelming sense of urgency. Not fear at first, but pressure. A feeling that remaining still is a mistake. Some say the air feels heavier near the figures, charged with motion that pulls attention and body alike. The figures never speak. They do not gesture. Yet guests report knowing exactly where they are being guided. Toward the docks. Several individuals claim to have felt physical contact. A firm presence at the back or shoulder. Not a shove, but a redirection, steering them down hallways, toward stairwells that lead outside. Those who resist describe dizziness and disorientation, as if the building itself turns against their sense of balance. Security footage offers little clarity. Cameras capture empty corridors, flickering lights, and occasional distortion that blurs the frame for seconds at a time. No figures appear on playback. Staff reviewing the footage often find wet footprints on the floor beneath cameras that recorded nothing at all. Morning inspections reveal damp patches along walls and railings. The moisture smells of saltwater, not rain. Maintenance crews find no burst pipes, no leaks from the roof. The water appears and disappears without trace. The inn's history provides partial context. Widowmaker Wharf earned its name during an era when storms claimed lives with little warning. Dockworkers were known to vanish during night shifts, lost to sudden swells or unstable planks. Records list accidents, but many details were never recovered. Older harbor logs mention strange occurrences after particularly violent storms. Lights seen moving along the docks when no ships were present. Sounds of footsteps pacing the pier long after crews had gone home. These accounts were written plainly, without speculation, then quietly archived. Guests who experience the figures often report one shared sensation above all others. A certainty that the figures are wet because they have come from below. From the water itself. That their path through the inn is not random, but familiar, as if retracing routes walked many times before. Those who make it outside describe the strongest pull near the edge of the dock. The sound of water grows louder there, no longer distant or ambient, but immediate and insistent. The darkness beyond the railing feels open, expectant. Several guests have been found standing at the end of the pier in the early hours, soaked with seawater despite no recorded splash. When questioned, they struggle to recall how they arrived there. Most insist they were simply following instructions that felt obvious at the time. The inn has taken steps to reduce risk. Doors to the docks are locked overnight. Railings are reinforced. Staff conduct frequent patrols. These measures have reduced incidents, but not eliminated reports. Employees speak carefully about the inn. They avoid certain hallways after dark. They do not linger near the dock entrances at night. Some claim the figures never approach staff, only guests unfamiliar with the building. There is a belief among long-term workers that the figures are not seeking harm, but continuation. That they move as they always have, guiding movement toward the water because that is where their work once led. Skeptics argue that stress, suggestion, and the inn's reputation contribute to shared experiences. Yet this explanation does not account for physical signs like water pooling indoors, or guests fleeing with no prior knowledge of the stories. By daylight, Widowmaker Wharf Inn appears harmless once more. Sunlight reflects off calm water. Floors are dry. The halls are quiet. Guests who remain feel embarrassed by their fear, uncertain how to explain what felt so real in the dark. Many choose to leave anyway. The inn continues to operate, its booking steady, its reputation unspoken beyond whispered warnings. It offers warmth, shelter, and views of the harbor that seem peaceful by day. But when night falls and the tide shifts, the building remembers what it was built beside. Figures drip water through its halls. Footsteps echo toward the docks. And those who stay long enough may feel the same pull that others felt before them. A direction offered without words, leading outward, toward the edge where land ends and the water waits. On the southern edge of Lake Superior in Michigan's Upper Peninsula stands the Pale Horizon Inn. Built in the early 1920s as a retreat for surveyors and cartographers mapping the Great Lakes shoreline. The structure retains its original fieldstone facade, wide lakeside veranda, and tall arched windows that frame the water like living paintings. By day the view is serene. Mist rises in soft veils. Loons call in the distance. But as twilight deepens the lake does not darken. It begins to shimmer. Guests seated on the porch or gazing from their rooms often notice them first as faint pinpricks of light, a golden, steady, and low to the water's surface. They move with purpose. Not drifting. Not bobbing like buoys. Gliding smoothly across the black expanse as if guided by unseen currents. Some appear singly. Others in quiet procession. They never approach the shore. Instead they follow a slow arc parallel to the inn's shoreline, vanishing into the far mist just before reaching the horizon. Many have tried to follow them. Not by Boata the inn has Nani but on foot along the gravel path that winds toward the old boathouse. The lights seem to draw closer as one walks. Beckoning. Encouraging. Yet each path ends the same way. At a locked door. The boathouse entrance. The storage shed. Even the basement hatch near the foundation. All secured with heavy padlocks that show no signs of rust or tampering. Keys have been lost for decades. Yet guests swear the locks feel warm to the touch after the lights pass. And the dorsa, though firmly shoulda, sometimes bear faint moisture streaks. Inside the inn another shift occurs as dawn approaches. Rooms on the lakeside grow noticeably colder between 4:30 and 6 a.m. Not drafty. Not damp. Just a steady drop in temperature, 5 to 8 degrees below the rest of the building. Thermostats register normally. HVAC systems function without fault. Yet guests report pulling extra blankets close, their breath faintly visible in the dim pre-dawn light. Housekeeping staff confirm it. Linens feel cool even after fresh laundering. Mirrors fog slightly without cause. And in those hours the silence is profound. No wind. No wildlife. Just the soft lap of water far below. The inn's original blueprints mention a now sealed tunnel leading from the basement toward the lake shore, a service passage for ice delivery in winter. Ground-penetrating radar in 2014 confirmed the tunnel still exists. Collapsed in sections. Flooded at the lower end. Yet thermal imaging detected no airflow. No water movement. Only a consistent cool signature radiating upward from its path, strongest just before sunrise. Longtime caretakers speak of the lights with quiet familiarity. Not as omens. Not as warnings. But as markers. One former groundskeeper, who tended the property for 30 years, said the lights appear most often in autumn. When the lake is calm. When the air holds the memory of summer but the water has already turned deep and cold. He never tried to open the locks. He simply left the porch light on until dawn. A small courtesy. A way of saying, I see you. I'm still here. Guests who experience the cold hours often describe a strange sense of clarity upon waking. Thoughts feel sharper. Memories more vivid. Some report dreams of standing on a dock in fog. Not lost. Just waiting. Others find small details from childhood unexpectedly clearer, the pattern of a Grand Mothra's quilt, the sound of a distant train whistling, though they cannot say why. No one has been harmed at the Pale Horizon Inn. No doors have been forced. No lights have drawn anyone into danger. The phenomena are gentle. Persistent. Almost ceremonial. Perhaps the lights are not lures but signals. Not meant to be followed but witnessed. A nightly ritual performed by the lake and the land in quiet collaboration. The cold before dawn, maybe it is not emptiness, but presence. A reminder that some thresholds are not crossed. They are honored. As morning light spreads across the water, the lights fade. The doors remain locked. The chill lifts. And the inn stands once more in daylight. Waiting for twilight. And the next quiet crossing of the Pale Horizon. The last Port Colonial Inn stands on a granite promontory, its white clapboard facade the first and last sight of land for a certain kind of traveler. Its white clapboard facade the first and last sight of land for a certain kind of traveler. A kind of weary anticipation, windows gazing perpetually at the horizon. Windows gazing perpetually at the horizon. Built during the age of tall ships, it served as a final lodging for sailors awaiting their vessels, and a first welcome for those stepping onto solid ground after months at sea. It served as a final lodging for sailors awaiting their vessels, and a first welcome for those stepping onto solid ground after months at sea. And a first welcome for those stepping onto solid ground after months at sea. The inn has witnessed countless arrivals and departures. And according to guests and locals alike, still does, long after the regular shipping lanes have shifted away. The phenomenon is most often reported on nights of heavy fog, or under a bright, moonlit sky when the water is calm. Guests hear ships arriving that never appear. The sounds are unmistakable and layered. First, the distant creak of wooden hulls and the faint shout of a boatswain's call. Then, the closer rustle of sails being furled. And the heavy splash of an anchor chain running out through a hawsehole. The sounds seem to come from just beyond the cove, so vivid that guests will rise from their beds and peer out into the darkness. But the water remains empty. The sounds fade, leaving only the real and steady sigh of the surf against the rocks. For some visitors, the experience is more intimate. They do not just hear the arrivals. They wake with saltwater-soaked clothing. It is never their entire outfit. Or the hem of a nightshirt, cold and clinging as if it had been dipped in the sea. There are no open windows, no leaks in the ceiling, no logical explanation for the localized dampness that smells unmistakably of ocean depths. The locals in the village down the coast have a saying about the inn. They say the last port never truly closes. They do not mean it is open 24 hours a day. They mean its purpose remains active, regardless of management or season. A fisherman, coming in late from the grounds, might see a soft light burning in one of the upper rooms, even when the inn is officially shuttered for the winter. The old sign, which creaks on its iron bracket, is said to swing gently on windless nights, mimicking the motion of a ship at anchor. A marine biologist, Dr. Eris Thorne, stayed at the inn while studying coastal acoustics. He was skeptical of the stories. On his second night, he was awakened by the clear, resonant sound of a ship's bell, followed by the tromp of heavy boots on what sounded like a wooden deck. He went to his window with a high-powered light. The bay was empty. Intrigued, he reviewed his audio equipment, which was set up to record whale song. The sensitive hydrophones in the water had picked up nothing unusual. But the microphone on his own balcony had captured a faint, anomalous set of frequencies that, when processed, mirrored the acoustic profile of a large, wooden sailing vessel. Even stranger, when he woke the next morning, the wool sweater he had left draped over a chair was damp to the touch from the elbows down, and carried the distinct, mineral scent of deep-sea water. Scientific interpretations point to auditory pareidolia, where the mind assembles random wave and wind sounds into familiar patterns. The saltwater dampness could be explained by exceptionally humid sea air condensing on specific fabrics. The light in the window is a reflection from the village below. And the swinging sign is the result of subterranean vibrations from the surf. But the lore of the harbor offers a different view. They speak of the concept of a last port. Not just as a place on a map, but as a moment in a sailor's existence. The inn, they say, exists in that moment permanently. It is a way station for journeys that are not yet complete. The sounds are the echoes of ships that are still trying to make landfall, vessels lost to storm or time, repeating their final approach. The salt water on the clothes is a sign that a guest has been recognized, their presence momentarily overlapping with that of a drowned sailor finally stumbling ashore, dripping wet and searching for a bed. The current innkeeper maintains the traditions. Each evening, she places a lit lantern in a ground-floor window facing the sea. It is a historic gesture, once used to guide boats into the cove. Now, she says, it is to help them find the door. She also keeps a large, brass basin of fresh water and towels in the main hallway, a convenience she claims is for sandy feet. But guests notice the towels are changed frequently, often found damp and unused. To stay at the last port Colonial Inn is to book a room in a memory. You are sleeping in a building that is forever waiting, forever listening for the creak of rigging and the call of the watch. The sounds you hear are not hauntings. They are arrivals. The salt on your sleeve is not a stain. It is a welcome. And the light in the window, burning in the off-season dark. The last port is always open. Always expecting, ready to receive travelers from across the widest and most timeless of seas. Thank you for staying with me tonight as we explored the haunted colonial harbor inns of Connecticut. These inns were built to offer shelter, warmth, and rest. But the sea has a long memory. It remembers every ship lost. Every sailor taken. Every soul that never made it home. And along these harbors, the past still checks in when night falls. If you ever find yourself staying at an old coastal inn, listen carefully. If you hear waves where there should be none, do not investigate. If you smell salt water in your room, do not follow it. And if someone knocks at your door long after midnight, be very careful before answering. Rest well tonight, my friend. And may the tide never carry you back to places that refuse to let go.